Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at a fascinating stack of sources. I mean, we've got literary analyses, historical texts, and these really deep character studies.
It's a huge pile of material today.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's all drawn from this classic Chinese mythological epic called Fengshen Yanyi, which that translates to the Investiture of the Gods.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission today is to completely redefine what ultimate victory actually looks like. And we're doing it all through the lens of this single, incredibly enigmatic character named Wudang Shengmu.
Which is such a great focus because her story really flips the script on what winning means.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
You know how in every epic movie or, I don't know, every competitive video game or even just in a hyper-aggressive corporate environment,
Yeah.
we are basically conditioned to idolize the loudest fighters.
Oh, totally. The ones making the most noise.
Right. The ones who just kick down the door, put up massive numbers, and take everyone out. We idolize that.
Yeah, because modern culture just loves a spectacular display of force. I mean, we naturally gravitate toward the person who visibly dominates the room because, that feels like winning.
It looks like winning. But the sources we're digging into today prove why that exact mindset, that obsession with explosive, visible dominance, it might actually be the quickest way to destroy yourself.
Yeah, it's a trap.
It is. Today's deep dive is really about the power of doing absolutely nothing when everyone around you is just losing their minds.
And for you listening, I really want to ground this immediately because yes, we are exploring ancient mythology, but the underlying mechanics of the story, they provide an absolute masterclass in risk management.
Risk management, emotional control, all of it.
Exactly. Long-term strategic thinking. I mean, this text is essentially a survival guide for navigating massive, complex systems that are just, designed to chew you up and spit you out.
So to understand the sheer scale of what we're talking about, we have to set the stage a bit. Fengshen Yanyi isn't just some localized skirmish.
No, not at all.
It is a universe-shattering war. It's set during the fall of the Sheng dynasty and the rise of the Zhou dynasty. But it's not just humans fighting.
Right. You've got gods, immortals, demons, literally everyone gets dragged into this apocalyptic conflict.
And the universe of this epic, it operates on this fundamental law called the mandate of heaven, which I found this part of the reading so interesting.
Yeah, the mandate is crucial. It isn't just a vague philosophical concept here. In this world, the mandate is essentially an inescapable algorithm.
Right.
The universe has basically mathematically decided that the Shang dynasty will fall and the Zhou dynasty will rise. It's an inevitability.
So the immortals basically split into different factions, choosing how they want to respond to this massive cosmic shift.
Exactly. And that brings us to our central character, Wudang Shengmu.
Right, Wudang. And the faction she belongs to is the Shijiao, which translates to the School of Interception. And from my reading of the notes, this school is wild because they basically operate on an open enrollment policy.
Yeah, anyone can join. Humans, spirits, animals.
Right. And their whole philosophy is about intercepting a glimmer of survival from the heavens. Like they just naturally resist fate.
They are the ultimate underdogs. They're constantly pushing against the natural order of things. And Wudang Shengmu, she is an elite member of this faction.
Elite is almost an understatement.
True. I mean, she is one of the 4 core direct disciples of the school's supreme master, the Tantian Jiazu. So she sits at the absolute apex of the mythological hierarchy.
And her peers are heavyweights. We're talking characters like Dua Bao Daren, Jinling Shengmu, and Gailing Shengmu.
Yeah, terrifyingly powerful entities, like shifting mountains and boiling oceans level of power.
Exactly. And the sources are incredibly specific about her power level. She isn't the weak link of the group. Wudang has strength that is entirely equal to those elite peers.
Which sets up the massive paradox of her character.
Yes, because despite having this top-tier world-bending power, she has almost zero epic battle scenes in the entire text.
Basically none.
There are practically no mass-scale fights with her name on them. She acts entirely as an observer. And I have to be honest, reading that initially made me want to push back hard.
Oh, I'm sure. It feels counterintuitive.
It does. Because if you have the power to save your friends, to turn the tide of a war, and you just sit back and watch, that feels like a massive betrayal.
Yeah, it looks bad on paper.
It's like owning a Ferrari and only driving it 10 miles an hour in a school zone. Like, what is the point? Isn't her lack of presence just, well, cowardice? If your entire school is bleeding on the battlefield, isn't standing on the sidelines just self-preservation at the cost of your honor?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it only looks like cowardice if you measure value by visible action.
Okay, fair.
The author deliberately wrote her this way to illustrate a much deeper point. Her lack of flashy attacks. That's a conscious, highly calculated withholding of power.
Because of the mandate of heaven?
Exactly. Wudang recognizes that the overarching tide of history is moving against her faction. The algorithm has already determined the outcome. Engaging in the Shangzu War just means throwing her life away in meaningless attrition.
So she isn't just hiding, she's refusing to play a rigged game.
She understands that the fights themselves are traps. I mean, when the entire universe is undergoing a systemic collapse, stepping onto the battlefield just makes you a target for the algorithm to eliminate.
Wow.
Yeah, she represents the rational core of her school. She maintains a strict, impenetrable boundary between herself and the chaos.
And that concept of the battlefield being a trap, it becomes horrifyingly clear when we look at what happens to her peers.
That's brutal.
Because the rest of the Jie Sect completely lacked her restraint, and the results were catastrophic. Reading through the lore, I mean, their strategy was a masterclass in what not to do.
They basically engaged in a massive mythological drip feed.
Yes. They didn't deploy as a unified front at all.
Right. Driven by personal loyalty or anger or ego, they just continually rushed down the mountain to join the war one by one.
It's like the ultimate horror movie mistake. You never split the party.
Exactly. But they did it over and over. They walked directly into a meat grinder, perfectly isolating themselves so the rival faction, the Chanjiao, could just pick them off.
And the most glaring example of this fatal error is a character named Zhao Gongming. The sources describe him as the embodiment of peak combat power. Like, if you were drafting a fantasy team, he's your first pick.
No question. His raw offensive capability was practically unmatched. But his fatal flaw was entirely psychological.
Right, he was super hot-headed.
Hot-headed, impulsive, and deeply, deeply attached to his ego. He couldn't stand the idea of his sect being disrespected.
Which makes him incredibly easy to manipulate. I mean, the rival faction doesn't even need to overpower him in a fair fight. They just bait him.
They provoke him, he steps onto the battlefield completely blinded by aggression, and he gets schemed against.
Yeah, they use a dark magic curse to assassinate him from afar. So his raw strength meant absolutely nothing, because his emotional state made him completely predictable.
And in complex systems, predictability is lethal. But Zhao Gongming's death, it triggers a secondary, much larger disaster.
Because he was so beloved by his allies.
Exactly. His assassination becomes an emotional catalyst, specifically for the Sanxiao Sisters, Young Xiao, Qin Xiao, and Big Xiao.
The three Xiao. And let's be clear, from what I read, these three sisters do not play around.
Not at all.
When they hear about Zhao's death, they are consumed by grief. They come down the mountain and just unleash a terrifying team burst attack. They lay down this magical formation called the 9-turn Yellow River Array.
And we should probably explain what an array actually is in this context, because it's not just, soldiers standing in a line.
Right, it's way bigger than that.
In Chinese mythological terms, an array is essentially a localized reality warping field. It's a magical domain where the creators get to dictate the laws of physics. And the 9-turn Yellow River Array was specifically designed to strip immortals of their cultivation.
So it erases centuries of magical progress.
Exactly. It reduces them to mere mortals.
It's basically a localized nuclear option. And the scale of what they achieve with it is staggering. I mean, the sources note that this is one of the most exaggerated combat records in the entire story.
It really is.
The sisters completely suppress the rival Sanxiao Sect's top tier. They catch all 12 golden immortals inside the array. They nearly break the rival faction in a single afternoon.
Yeah, it's a massive play.
Which brings me to a huge question. I was thinking about this while reading. If the Sanxiao Sisters can come down the mountain and completely neutralize 12 top-tier immortals in one massive play, shouldn't they be considered the strongest?
It's a fair question.
Right. I mean, in any corporate metric, in any sports league, they are putting up the highest numbers. They clear the board.
They absolutely achieve a miraculous, unprecedented peak. But this is where we really have to separate short-term metrics from long-term survival.
Okay, how so?
Look at the mechanism behind their victory. It was entirely reactionary. They didn't enter the battlefield with a cold, calculated goal of shifting the geopolitical landscape. They entered it because they were blinded by grief. Raw emotion was the fuel for that array.
And when emotion is your fuel, you develop severe tunnel vision. You just stop looking at the broader board.
Furthermore, executing a reality-warping move that magnitude, it requires a massive commitment of energy and physical positioning. Because it was such a high-profile, high-impact move, It made them incredibly visible.
Oh, right. You can't quietly lay down a nuclear option.
Exactly. They drew the immediate attention of the ultimate figures in this universe. I'm talking about supreme boss-level entities like Yuan Shitianzun, who had previously stayed completely out of the direct fighting.
Oh, wow. So they basically forced the universe's moderation team to step in and ban them.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. Yeah. Because the sisters' position was fixed to their array and their motives were entirely predictable, they were easily located.
And then what happened?
The supreme figures stepped onto the battlefield, shattered the array, and wiped the Sanxiao Sisters out of existence.
Unbelievable.
That's the fatal flaw of explosive, emotion-driven power. It burns incredibly bright, but it leaves you structurally exposed to a counterattack you cannot survive.
So they won the moment, but they lost their lives. Which perfectly sets up the core comparison of this whole analysis. We've seen the absolutely destructive results of the Sanxiao Sisters' emotional warfare. Now we have to contrast their raw burst power directly against Wudang's quiet consistency.
Because it completely redefines what strength actually means in a high-stakes environment.
Exactly.
The source texts actually provide a brilliant categorization to frame this comparison. They classify the Sanxiao Sisters as top elders.
Top elders.
Yeah. These are your high-impact burst players. They can change the tide of a battle in an instant, but their operational risk is extraordinarily high because they rely on depleting massive amounts of their own energy.
And Wudang Shengmu.
Wudang is categorized as sect leader tier. She is stable, she is restrained, and her operational risk is effectively zero. She doesn't drain her own resources to prove a point.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It makes me think of modern investing or even structural engineering. The Sanxiao Sisters are like day traders, betting their life savings on high-risk meme stocks.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, like they make a huge splash, they put up big numbers for a minute, but eventually they lose their shirts. Or, structurally, they're like a massive, towering skyscraper built purely out of rigid steel. It dominates the skyline, but when a massive hurricane hits, its own rigidity causes it to snap in half.
Yeah, it can adapt.
Exactly. Whereas Wudang Shengmu is the quiet investor putting her money in index funds.
Yeah.
It's boring, she never goes viral, but she keeps her capital intact when the market crashes. Or, building-wise, she's designed with base isolators, those flexible foundations they use in earthquake zones.
I love that. She absorbs the kinetic energy.
She sways with the movement and never fights the shifting of the earth itself. It's not intimidating to look at, but when the dust settles, she's the only one still standing.
That structural analogy is perfect because it highlights exactly how Wudang interacts with the mandate of heaven. She recognized the earthquake was coming.
She knew the algorithm.
Right. The overarching tide of history was shifting toward the Zhou dynasty. By refusing to engage in emotional battles, by keeping her foundation flexible, she ensured her energy reserves were completely intact.
And the sources point out that this quote-unquote boring strategy meant that if she were eventually forced to fight, it would only be on her terms.
Exactly.
It would be in a highly controlled, top-tier duel where all the variables were in her favor. I mean, in an elimination game as intense as the Investiture of the Gods, having a zero-defeat record because you simply recognize a bad bet and choose not to fight that is the ultimate proof of strength.
Avoiding fatal errors requires infinitely more discipline than landing a lucky punch.
Wow. Yeah, it really does.
It requires suppressing your ego entirely. I mean, you have to watch your peers, people you have trained with for millennia, run off to fight for glory or revenge, and you have to hold your ground.
You have to do nothing.
You have to accept being perceived as weak in the short term to guarantee your survival in the long term.
So we've established the mechanics of her strategy. She's the flexible foundation, she's the master of restraint, but we have to look at the ultimate payoff.
The ending.
Right. How did this quiet index fund strategy actually survive the mythic equivalent of a total apocalyptic market collapse?
To see the payoff, we have to look at the climax of the entire epic, which is the myriad immortal array. This is the endgame.
The finale.
Right. The Supreme Master, Tongtian Zhaozu, finally steps onto the battlefield himself. He gathers the remaining forces of the Jie Sect to make one final apocalyptic stand against the rival factions.
So it's the ultimate final boss fight. But, spoiler alert, it doesn't go their way.
No. It is a total systemic collapse. The Jie Sect is comprehensively defeated. Their master is beaten. The array shatters. Thousands of immortals are killed or captured. It is the end of their faction as a functional power in the universe.
So how does Wudang survive this? Because if the entire structure is collapsing all around you, how do you just slip out the back door?
It's a great question. From the sources, it seems her survival came down to a hyper-developed sense of situational awareness.
She was watching everything.
Yes. While every other immortal in that array was locked in mortal combat, blinded by bloodlust and loyalty to their master, Wudang kept her perspective wide. She was participating, but she was never emotionally consumed by the battle.
So she never got tunnel vision.
Exactly. The text notes that the moment she recognized the structural integrity of the array was failing, the moment she saw her master could not win. She didn't throw herself into the meat grinder for the sake of honor.
She just detached.
She detached her ego from the sinking ship and physically retreated before the borders of the array collapsed inward.
She read the room, saw the ceiling caving in, and literally walked out before the exits were blocked.
Yeah.
And the brilliance of this is highlighted when we look at the final fates of the core cast we talked about earlier. Like, let's run down the list of the elite heavyweights. What happened to Duobao Doran?
Captured, he is taken away to the Western Heavens and assimilated into a completely different religious faction. He eventually becomes a Buddha, so he survives, but he loses his original identity entirely.
Okay, what about Wudang Shengmu?
She fights to the bitter end and is killed in battle.
And Zhao Gaoming and the Sanxiao Sisters.
So they died earlier, right? But their souls were forced into canonization.
Right, and this is a crucial concept we need to explain to you listening. Because in Western mythology, becoming a god sounds like a massive promotion.
It sounds great.
Yeah, but in Taoist lore, it is a devastating punishment.
It is the ultimate gilded cage. I mean, in this universe, a true, free Taoist immortal is unbound. They wander the cosmos, they continue their spiritual cultivation, and they answer to no one.
Total freedom.
Right. But when you are killed in this specific war and canonized as a god, your soul is bound to the heavenly court.
You essentially get drafted into a cosmic bureaucracy. You are forced to clock in to a heavenly 9 to 5, managing the weather or human fortunes.
Exactly.
And you completely lose your free will and your ability to reach higher enlightenment.
Yeah.
You are trapped in the system forever.
Precisely. They lost their autonomy. But then we look at Wudang Shengmu's fate.
The contrast is huge.
It is. Amidst the complete annihilation of her sect, she retreats without a single scratch. She is the sole surviving core member of the elite disciples.
And according to the Taoist and folk extensions of the lore mentioned in the sources, she isn't forced into the heavenly bureaucracy. She isn't assimilated into the West.
No.
She retreats deep into the mountains and continues her cultivation as a true, free Taoist master. She retains her absolute autonomy.
She remains unbound. So if we synthesize all of this, Wudang represents the absolute peak of judgment. The central thesis of these sources boils down to one incredibly profound distinction. The Sanxiao Sisters won the battle, but Wudang won the ending.
So what does this all mean? Won the battle, won the ending. It completely reframes how we look at success.
It really does.
Because as a learner, as someone navigating a hyper-connected, high-pressure modern world, you are constantly pressured to engage.
Yeah.
You are told that visibility is value.
All the time. Society demands that you prove your worth in every single interaction.
Yes.
You are expected to have an opinion on every controversy, to fight for dominance in every meeting, to treat every minor conflict as a hill to die on.
You feel like you have to be the Sanxiao Sisters.
Yeah.
You feel like you have to be a top Elder Burst player, constantly laying down your own 9-turn Yellow River array just to get noticed.
Just to prove you're there.
Exactly. But Wudang's story is literally a 3,000-year-old permission slip to simply step back. Sometimes, the most powerful strategic move you can make is to recognize a flawed system, protect your energetic capital, and just choose not to fight.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a critical, lingering question to consider today.
Yeah? What's that?
If true mastery, if actually winning the ending, means having the discipline and situational awareness to avoid the trap of constant conflict, what does it say about our modern society that we constantly reward and elevate the burst players?
Right. The people who put on a spectacular show go viral and inevitably burn out.
Are we being conditioned by the systems we live in to play a flashy, emotional, short-term game? Are we being baited into exhausting ourselves so that others can profit from our burnout?
Wow.
While the true masters, the ones who really understand the board, quietly walk away with their energy, their capital, and their freedom intact.
That is a profound question to sit with. Next time you feel the overwhelming urge to rev your engine and charge onto a battlefield that isn't yours, just remember, the loudest fighter in the room rarely makes it to the end of the story.